Hello, friends. Welcome to Staying in My Lane podcast. We unpack life's messy lessons, the hard things, the difficult conversations. We break down childhood trauma, adolescent trauma, adult trauma. We tie all of that together and look at how we can make our lives better, how we can heal. There are times that I have people on the podcast talking about their own experiences. And recently, there's just been me talking because it's summer and I'm not really doing anything. I've been home and there's been a lot of changes. So for now, you just get me. You can find this podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, RSS, and almost every other platform. I'm probably forgetting a lot, but just go look for Staying in My Lane podcast with the logo and I'm sure you can find it. So the big topic that's been trending on this podcast since I started is generational trauma, family trauma, childhood trauma. I've had people on who've talked about their own experiences. I've talked about a little bit of mine. And that is a hot topic. In 2025, we are the people who are discussing what we went through, what was suppressed and pushed down, and what we were told to keep quiet. And we are healing. We are in our healing era. We are trying to make our lives better so that we can be better parents, better spouses, better friends. We are healing, and it's not an easy process. And today I want to talk about something that has kind of been, if you think of it as, I'm a visual person, so this is why I'm giving this visual in my mind. You can think of the family topic and generational trauma as a big spider web and a big diagram, where that's in the middle, and there are all of these offsets off of that. And we've covered a little bit on this podcast so far. And I like hearing other people's experiences because it makes me realize that there's more people out there who can relate to how I'm feeling or what I've experienced, not necessarily just with family, but with anything, right? We often think that we are supposed to suppress our trauma or diminish what we feel because it's kind of a taboo subject, right? Society doesn't like us to talk about the messy part of healing. They just like it to be the clean-cut version of healing where it's perfectly outlined and there's no baggage. However, that's not reality, and I don't know anybody whose trauma and healing journey has been clean-cut and doesn't have baggage and doesn't have struggles. So that's where this podcast comes in. Again, I want to be relatable. I want people to feel like they have somebody to listen to who knows how they feel. Even if it's one person, even if it's 100, which I have a ton of followers and a ton of listeners, so I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. But just to be able to validate an experience or a feeling it can be so empowering, especially when you're not getting that validation from people who are close to you. So first things first, before we get started, I want to just give a trigger warning to anyone who listens to this. This may bring up feelings that are unresolved. It may cause anxiety, stress, guilt, frustration, shame, anger, which all of those are okay. It's okay to feel what you feel. It's not okay to not work through it. It's not okay to take it out on other people. So, before we get started, I want to rewind it back to the very first episode that we talked about family. What exactly are we talking about? Generational trauma refers to the psychological and emotional wounds that are passed down from generation to the generation after that. This can happen through behaviors, beliefs, parenting styles, and even in ways that families may handle stress, shame, grief, or conflict. This can start with a traumatic event, and when that trauma isn't processed or healed, it doesn't just affect the person who experienced the trauma, it actually can ripple through generations, shaping the emotional and relational patterns of their children, grandchildren, and beyond. And that's where intergenerational trauma comes in. It's the transmission of the trauma across multiple generations. You might hear them used interchangeably, and while they're closely related, think of generational trauma as the source. Think of it as a power plug to electricity or energy. And intergenerational trauma as the ripple effect, so that would be the cord being plugged into the source. And here's the thing, trauma is not always talked about, right? We've talked about that numerous times. We don't need to go back down that. Sometimes it shows up as silence. Sometimes it looks like anxiety that no one can explain, or a fear that seems to live in the body even when life is, quote, safe. Because while trauma can be inherited, it can be so healing to work through it. And when you finally let go of the pain and the guilt and the shame, and you set those boundaries and you break those cycles, it can be very empowering, not only for you, but for your children, your spouse, and everybody in your life. You guys know, if you've listened to my previous episodes, that I have talked about my generational trauma. And if you've listened to the most recent episode, you know that it's made my family have certain feelings, and they basically just don't want to talk to me, which they never really have anyways. They've kind of always kept me at arm's length because I'm the youngest. I'm the baby. I don't know anything, whatever it may be. But what I've realized is the moment you realize that some family members will never admit that they hurt you, not because it didn't happen, not because they don't remember, but because by admitting they hurt you would mean admitting they did something wrong. And what I've learned is people who are driven by narcissism or control, that kind of admission is unbearable and it's very threatening to them. So let's unpack that for a second. Let's talk about the intersection of truth, accountability, narcissism, and meanness. Because it's not about family drama per se, it's about emotional survival. When you confront someone in your family about something they did to you or said to you that hurt you, what you're really doing is offering them a choice. They can step into humility, admit their fault, and try to repair the relationship, or deflect, deny, minimize, or even flip the script to make you the problem. Maybe they say things like, "You're remembering it wrong, that didn't happen," or "You deserved it." And for a narcissistic or deeply defensive person, that first option, humility, is off the table. Because their identity is built on the idea that they're good, they're right, they're the victim. Anything that threatens that identity feels like an attack. So instead of saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," they'll say things like, "You're too sensitive, that never happened. Again, you're remembering it wrong. You always make everything about you." Really anything to avoid holding that mirror up to themselves, because to them it's not just a mirror, it's a weapon. So to kind of describe it a little bit more, we've talked about narcissism, there's an episode on it. But narcissism is not just vanity, it's a psychological defense system. It actually protects the fragile self-esteem with a blame shifting and emotional manipulation perspective. When a narcissistic family member hears, "You hurt me," what they actually hear is, "You're a bad person." And to a narcissist, that's an intolerable statement. Instead of sitting with that discomfort, they retaliate. And then there's meanness, something that we don't talk about often enough. Some people in families aren't just defensive, they're plain mean. And they can take pleasure in manipulating and maintaining that power through shame, silence, and fear. Admitting that they hurt you would break that very system that they've used to keep that control. In return, they deny, they gaslight, and they punish you. Not because your pain isn't valid or real, but by acknowledging that pain, it would make them wrong. And being wrong in their world is worse than losing you. And honestly, one of the hardest truths that I've ever had to accept is that some people would rather lose a relationship than lose control or lose credibility in the eyes of others. They will let the bond die rather than breathe life into it with an apology and change. That's not about you, that's about them. That's their emotional limit, their fear, their ego stepping in. And knowing that can be strangely liberating, but it can also be very painful because it helps you see that their silence or denial is not proof that your pain is invalid, but it's proof that they can't meet you where you are. They're not capable of giving you the repair that you deserve. I want to transition to a topic that's related to narcissism, but also addresses the family dynamics of conditional love. The difference between negotiated love and true unconditional love. Negotiated love sounds like, "We have done everything for you. Look at what we have sacrificed." We were always there when you messed up or made a mistake. It's love that comes with the terms of agreement, conditions, a contract that you never signed. It's kind of like love that keeps receipts in a shoebox. And when you try to set a boundary, suddenly those receipts are pulled out like evidence in a courtroom. You feel like you have to perform for love. You can't be messy, you can't be hurt, you can't be honest, because that honesty disrupts the unspoken deal and unspoken contract. We love you as long as you don't make us uncomfortable. And that's not love. That's emotional control dressed up in guilt. True love doesn't keep a scoreboard. It listens, it reflects, it apologizes when it gets it wrong. And most of all, it never asks you to betray yourself in order to be accepted. I'm not necessarily going to get into everything that I've experienced, but I've experienced a lot of this similar in my own life. So many of us come from families where we're told love is about sacrifice. And yes, love does involve sacrifice sometimes. But in healthy families, sacrifice is mutual, voluntary, and not weaponized. In toxic families, sacrificial love is used to silence you, control you, or bind you to a guilt agreement. You hear things like, "After all we did for you, we gave you everything and this is how you repay us." That's not sacrifice. That's emotional debt collection. And you're never allowed to stop paying. And I don't mean actually paying money. I mean emotionally. The worst part is that you start to internalize that. You start to believe that you're the problem, that your boundaries are selfish, that your healing is traumatic, and your voice is disloyal. But the truth, you don't owe your self-worth and your well-being to someone else's guilt trips. In many families, there's one person, the head narcissist, who sets the emotional tone for the entire system. They are the one that no one confronts. They're the one who gets away with manipulation, cruelty, emotional outbursts. And while everyone else just adjusts around them like furniture in a room that doesn't belong to them, they play the victim and the authority at the same time. Everyone becomes actors in their emotional stage play. Moving on, I want to talk about the roles these people play in these families. First, we have the golden child. This is the one who gets the praise, who aligns with the narcissist's version of reality, who's rewarded for staying loyal, even at the expense of truth. Next, we have the scapegoat, the emotional dumping ground. This person is often the most sensitive, the most aware, the most emotionally intelligent, but also the most punished for being that. The lost child, the invisible one, the one who fades into the background to survive. And last, the enabler, the one who keeps the peace, stays quiet, makes excuses, and prioritizes the narcissist's needs over everyone else's safety. When you try to speak the truth into this kind of system, it doesn't just upset the narcissist, it disrupts the entire survival structure. That's why when you're treated like the dramatic one, the problem, or you're just being too emotional or remembering it wrong, because your healing threatens the lie that they've all agreed to live in. They live in the glass houses. I've said that before. When you live in a glass house and that starts to shatter, it becomes a fear and a threat to safety. Let's talk about the subtle emotional warfare. Being talked down to, being treated like you're still a child no matter how grown you are. The eye rolls, the dismissive tone, the little digs that they say, or just ignoring you and pretending you don't exist. It's actually not even just disrespectful, it's dehumanizing. These kind of people will call it joking or just how we are, or that's just how she is. But let's be clear, anyone who makes you feel small, confused, or less than is not loving you, they're controlling you. And eventually, you learn that not everyone deserves access to you, even if they share your bloodline. You can forgive people from afar. You can love someone and still know that they're not safe to be close to. Living in these systems leaves deep wounds. I didn't realize that until I grew up. I didn't realize that at 16 years old, I thought something was wrong with me. And now at 34, almost 35 years old, I see there's nothing wrong with me. I see things for how they are. I can read energy from across the room. I am very good at identifying if a person is safe or not based on their energy and their emotional feelings. And living in these systems impacts your relationships, your nervous system, your ability to trust, to feel joy, to say, I deserve better. You may experience things like constant self-doubt, guilt for setting boundaries, fear of rejection for speaking your truth, the need to over-explain or over-apologize. You become the adult who tries too hard to be good or easy or low maintenance. You become the mother who fears being too harsh or too soft because you're terrified of repeating what was done to you. And underprotected daughters become overprotective mothers. And I realize that that is me. The beautiful thing about healing is that awareness is just the beginning of freedom. When you finally see the dysfunction, not as your fault, but as your inheritance, you get to decide what you pass down and what ends and stops with you. This is where we reclaim our power. Breaking generational trauma doesn't start with therapy sessions or reading self-help books. It starts with a single sentence. This ends with me. It ends with you deciding, my children will not have to heal from me. They will not walk on eggshells. They will not have to earn my love. And their feelings will not be silenced to keep the peace. Breaking these curses means sitting with the pain that you were never allowed to feel as a child, so your kids don't have to also carry that burden. It means choosing to be different even when your family calls you crazy, dramatic, disloyal, or difficult. It means looking that cycle in the eye and saying, I'm done. It stops here. And you may lose relationships. You may be the black sheep or the scapegoat. You will gain peace in return. You will gain clarity. You will gain the freedom to show up in your own life fully, honestly, and unapologetically. For anyone who has experienced this as a child, please know that no child deserves to be physically, emotionally, or psychologically harmed, ever. Your behavior as a child was never a justification for abuse. Children act out. They struggle, they make mistakes, especially when they're hurting or trying to get attention, connection, or safety. That's normal, and that's part of being a child. It's the adult's job to provide guidance, love, and protection, not punishment or cruelty. Someone who minimizes your pain, someone who places the blame on a vulnerable version of you who had no real power as a child. These statements are not only false, but it's re-traumatizing. Someone who avoids their own accountability, it's almost an attempt to rewrite the narrative so they don't have to face the shame of not protecting you or failing you or doing something wrong when you were a child, or of being complicit in letting someone else harm you. So if you have experienced that, I want to tell you the truth. You were a child. You were doing the best you could with the tools and environment that you had. Remember, the toolbox. We only have the tools that we knew at the time. When we grow, when we heal, we develop new tools to add to our toolbox. And maybe we remove some of the old ones that are rusted and outdated. Children never deserve to be hurt. Not by your aunt, not by your uncle, your grandma, grandpa, mother, father, sibling. And when someone doesn't acknowledge that they hurt you, again, reverting back to the fact that they don't want to acknowledge it because that would mean they did something wrong, it makes it clearer that they are not willing or ready to face their own part in what happened. And it hurts. It can tear you apart. I'm dealing with that currently. I have dealt with that for years. And it's not because it's not just invalidation. It's betrayal. It's your family member siding with your abuser or siding with the fact that you deserved it. It's choosing comfort over truth again and again. It's deeply painful because some part of you probably still holds on to a hope that one day your family member is going to say, I'm sorry for not protecting you. I'm sorry for hurting you, or I'm sorry that I didn't believe you. This hope is what makes that rejection so agonizing and painful. Sometimes people don't talk about the trauma because they're trying to protect us. Other times it's because they never had the tools to face it themselves and heal. Either way, the impact remains. For children, growing up in that environment, not having the healthy tools in the toolbox, that silence, the betrayal, the anger, the shame, that can all be really confusing. You feel something's wrong, but you're told everything is fine. And that disconnect can create its own kind of emotional trauma. Again, gaslighting, shame, and a sense of not trusting your own feelings. So this is the part of the episode where we're going to explore the cost of unacknowledged trauma and how we can start to navigate healing even when people who came before us aren't ready to. Because healing doesn't always begin with them. Sometimes it begins with us. I want to start with something that has hit me hard recently, something that I was never prepared for. The way our childhood trauma can resurface when our own children reach the same age we were when we experienced the trauma. For me, that age was 12. My child is that age. And it brought up emotions that I didn't know were still living inside me. So this is the part of the episode that is about what it means to re-experience trauma through parenting, how we begin to heal it, and how we can forgive without forgetting by creating change, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow. No one warns you that parenting can stir up old wounds, that you'll be brought back to memories that you've buried just to survive. But the moment that my child turned the age that I experienced a lot of my trauma, I found myself transported back in time to a version of myself that was scared, confused, and deeply hurt. So the year that I experienced the most trauma, the year I stopped feeling safe, the year I realized that I had to protect myself and fight back, the year that my innocence cracked under pressure, abuse, and silence, was a really hard, transformative year for me and not necessarily a good transformation. Now, watching my child at this exact age where there's a lot of questioning the identity and sense of finding themselves, their peace, their curiosity, their questions, their sweetness, their puberty stage, all of that, I can't help but think this is the age I needed someone the most. This is the age where no one stepped in to protect me or be there for me. And it's a strange kind of disorienting grief because while I'm watching my child thrive and grow and heal and overcome their own trauma, part of me is mourning the little girl I was that no one saved or tried to protect or understand. We've talked about it before on here. Trauma does not live in the past, it lives in the body. And what I've learned is that when our children reach a certain developmental milestone, especially the one that mirrors a trauma point for us, our nervous system picks up on that and notices. Regardless of if we've done years of therapy, regardless of if we think we've moved on or healed, the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. And for me, my own trauma, my own reactions, and the way that I've dealt with things or different things that I've kind of grabbed onto in my personality, tools that I've used to cope, that I've reached into my toolbox to grab, they make sense based on the things that I look back on and realize as an adult. It was not normal for some of the things that happened in my family. And for me, I started feeling anxious, reactive, even irritable, not because of anything my child was doing, but because I was reliving something that I couldn't express into words. The memories came back, not always as pictures, but as feelings, waves of fear, discomfort, and even emotional flashbacks. And I realized I wasn't just parenting them, I was parenting her, the 12-year-old, 11-year-old me, the one who was never protected or understood. And in grieving that, I started to release guilt that I didn't even know I was holding. One of the most painful parts of healing is accepting that we can't go back in time and fix it. We can't rewrite our childhoods. We can't make people who hurt us say the things that we needed to hear. But what we can do is grieve what we didn't get. That grief is necessary. It's not self-pity, it's not victim mindset, it's honesty, and honesty is the foundation of healing. I had to allow myself to feel sadness of not being protected, the ache of not being believed, the innocence and the loss of that innocence of not being allowed to be a child at 12 because I had to step up and protect myself. But honestly, I look back on it and I realize that that's where a lot of my anger started, my resentment, my fear, my shame. A lot of that started around that age that I experienced a lot of my trauma. Here's where the healing deepens. When your child reaches the age where your trauma lived, you're not just parenting them, you're reparenting yourself. Because this time, I get to respond differently. This time, I get to offer protection. I get to give my children the gift of safety. I get to model healthy behavior and interactions, healthy boundaries, not just for my child, but for that part of me that didn't receive it back when I was that age. If my child feels something, I listen. If they make a mistake, I guide, not punish. If they express a need, I try to meet it. If they express a feeling, I try to understand it. And while I'm doing that for them, I'm also sending a message to the younger version of myself. You didn't deserve what happened. You were never too much. You were just a child trying to survive, and now I see you and I can be here for you. So let's talk about forgiveness, because this comes up a lot in trauma healing. I've had to come to terms with something. Forgiveness does not require access. It does not require reconnection. It does not require reconciliation. And it does not mean excusing what happened. Forgiveness for me looks like accepting that certain family members may never apologize, understanding that some family members may always minimize my pain, and releasing the need to change them so I can focus on changing me, even if I really, really want that connection or I crave that family feeling. Because what I won't do is forget the pain. I won't pretend it didn't happen. I won't shrink myself to make others feel comfortable, because remembering with clarity is part of what keeps me safe now. It's how I set boundaries. It's how I break cycles. This is truly the heart of the whole conversation. I'm not just healing for myself. I'm healing so my children don't inherit the same silence, shame, emotional neglect, or trauma that was passed down to me. Breaking generational patterns is not about being a perfect parent or shaming anybody else. It's about being a conscious parent. It's about recognizing when old wounds are speaking for you and choosing to not let them dictate your actions. It's about being able to pause and say, this reaction is not about my child, it's about my own pain. It's about creating a home where your children don't have to recover from their childhood, because you're doing the work and protecting them now. And yes, it's very hard, but it's worth every tear, every uncomfortable truth, every hard boundary, because the truth is that our kids deserve better. And so do we, even as adults. We deserve to heal. We deserve to have closure. We deserve to create boundaries without feeling guilty. If your child is reaching an age where your wounds were created, give yourself grace and understanding. You may feel a lot of different emotions like I have. This doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that you're finally witnessing what happened to you with new eyes and an open heart. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to say, this happened to me and it was wrong. You are allowed to confront people who hurt you. That's not selfish. That's not creating drama. That is called healing. This is how we move forward. This is how we break cycles. And this is how we set ourselves free. If you are listening to this and this hits you deep, hits you hard, that's not weakness. That's recognition. That's your truth in your body. That's your truth in your body telling you to feel something. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. You are not being too dramatic. You are someone who is finally naming what others pretended not to see. You don't have to shrink to make other people feel comfortable. You don't have to stay silent just because it keeps the peace. And you sure as hell don't have to keep paying the emotional bill for love that was never given freely. You were not born to play a role in someone else's dysfunction. You were born to be you, to be free, to be whole, to be the chain breaker in your family's story. So if they call you difficult or drama, let them. If they call you ungrateful or ridiculous, let them. Whatever they call you, let them. Because while they hold on to a cycle, they hold on to comfort, you're holding on to the future, you're healing. And that, my friends, is the kind of legacy worth building. But what happens when apologies aren't rooted in accountability? And even though you are healing and forgiving, it still feels painful. When someone can't take accountability, sometimes you'll hear things like, I'm sorry, but I don't remember it that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. And while they could have good meaning and intention behind it, let's be honest, that's not an apology. That's a PR statement for self-preservation. An apology that avoids the truth is not healing, it's hollow. It's like somebody saying they're sorry they stepped on your foot while still standing on it. True accountability sounds like, I believe you. I didn't know how much I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I may not remember everything, but your pain is real. Without that, an apology just becomes another form of control, a way for someone to say, see, I said sorry, now leave it alone and shut it down. But closure doesn't come from lip service. It comes from acknowledgement and change. Let's talk about what this actually does to you. Being told that you remember it wrong messes with your core sense of self. It confuses your memory, scrambles your instincts, and damages your ability to trust yourself, especially if it started when you were young. As a child, if you were constantly told that didn't happen, you're too sensitive, you're making a deal out of nothing, then as an adult, you might apologize for things that weren't your fault. You might doubt your gut even when it's screaming at you, gaslight yourself before anyone else even has to. You become your own silencer, and then you start to wonder if you're broken, when really you've just been trained to doubt your own reality. The truth is, if you remember the pain, it was real. If your body flinches at the memory, it was real. If it changed how you saw yourself or the world, it was real. And no one gets to take that from you. When we think about it, most survivors aren't asking for revenge. We're not even asking for perfect parents or perfect family members. We're asking for this one simple thing. I believe you, and I'm sorry. But for some people, especially those wrapped up in shame, ego, or narcissism, that sentence is almost impossible. Because, again, to admit your pain means they'd have to look at their own reflection. And a lot of people will destroy you before they ever face themselves. So they rewrite history. They minimize, they shift blame, they call it love, they gaslight. But let's be clear, love without truth is manipulation. Love without accountability is still harm. You can't heal in a place that refuses to see what broke you. I'm going to say that sentence one more time because I feel like it's really powerful. You cannot heal in a place that refuses to see what broke you. So what do you do when they won't admit it? When they know what happened and they refuse to? You choose you. You say, I'm allowed to tell the truth even if you deny it. I don't need your permission to heal. I trust myself and I believe myself. That's where those boundaries come in. You create boundaries, you limit that access. And again, boundaries are not punishments. You stop chasing acknowledgement from people who are committed to protecting their own version of the story. If you're a parent yourself or hope to be, that work is even more important. Because when you teach your kids that their feelings matter, their memories are valid, and they can talk to you about the hard things without fear or judgment, you're breaking that chain like we talked about. You are telling them that they don't have to grow up in a house where truth is punished. You will be heard, safe, and believed. You're giving them what you never had. And in doing that, you're healing the parts of yourself that were silenced for so long. So much like my 12-year-old self. You may start to question, do they even like me? And we've talked about emotional cruelty, being the scapegoat, the truth teller, the sensitive one, and that grief that comes with being deeply unseen in your own bloodline can be really painful. So let's just name it. Sometimes the people who were supposed to love you the most treat you like you're a burden. They dismiss your feelings, they roll their eyes at your sensitivity, they joke about you being too much or too dramatic, they talk about you but never with you, and eventually that message becomes crystal clear. Who I am is not welcome here. And deep down you wonder, if they really knew me, would they still love me? Or accept me? Or do they only love the version of me that doesn't ask for anything and stays silent? It hurts in a way that's hard to explain when your family doesn't know who you are. not because you're hiding, but because they've never been curious enough to ask. They've never shown interest in getting to know you, the version of you that's the present now version. They know your mistakes, but not your intentions. I bet that they could point out your mistakes, but not know who you really are. They know your breakdowns, your tantrums, your triggers, but not your bravery and strength to overcome. They see your reactions, but not the reasons behind them. You could be in a room with them and feel like a complete stranger. You wonder, why don't they ask about the things I care about? Why don't they see the work that I've done to heal? Why do they act like I'm still a child they wrote off years ago? And I can relate to that so much. That has been my experience for years. And to be honest, it feels like being emotionally orphaned. Like you were born into a family who never truly wanted you or saw you. And maybe the truth is that they didn't want to. So you have to accept that. Some families pride themselves on being blunt or real, but what they call honesty is actually meanness and cruelty. Belittling is not love. Mocking is not care. Silencing is not protection. They just are too calloused to hold space for your truth. In many dysfunctional families, there's always a scapegoat. In my family, it's me, the one person who carries the weight of everyone else's dysfunction. If you grew up constantly being blamed, ignored, if you were the one who was always the problem or the dramatic one, you may have become the family's emotional punching bag. And no matter how much you try to explain, heal, or evolve, they hold on to a fixed image of you, full of judgments, assumptions, and no care for understanding. One that serves their comfort, not your truth. It's easier to say, Lindsay's always been a little crazy, so I don't really want to have anything to do with her. She's so dramatic, she's a problem, creating drama and trying to get attention. They need you to be the difficult one, because if you're not, they'd have to face what they did. They may know what they did, but they don't care, and they're probably never going to give you the closure or admit it. When someone constantly invalidates you, when they ignore your healing, when they act like your boundaries are an attack, it's natural to start wondering, do they actually hate me? Because it doesn't feel like love. Love doesn't ridicule. Love doesn't isolate or ignore. Love doesn't punish you for needing empathy and understanding. Even if they love you, I did air quotes there, in their own way, that may be rooted in control, guilt, or ego. It may not feel like love to you, and that matters and that's valid. But again, love is not control. Love is not gaslighting. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be asked how you're really doing. You deserve a family who gets to know the person who you've become, not just the version who they froze in time. And for me, it's probably that teenage version of myself that they think is just living in my 30-year-old body. Well, 34-year-old body. But that's not true. And I, as well as you, deserve love that is curious, not controlling, compassionate, but not conditional, honest, but never cruel. And if they can't give that to you, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means that they're not your safe space, and that's their limitation, not yours. As we get ready to conclude this episode, we are going to talk about something that may feel uncomfortable and awkward. If someone, family or not, doesn't respect me, they do not get access to my kids. This is not about revenge, being petty, or punishing. It's about protection, breaking the cycle, and it's about understanding that just because someone is related to you by blood doesn't mean they are safe for you or your family. People say things like, they're still your mom, they're still your dad, they're still your aunt or your cousin or your grandma. We are no longer living in a time where we tolerate abuse and call it tradition. I don't care who is blood related. If you don't like me, if you don't want to acknowledge what I've been through and respect me and have a relationship, if you treat me like I'm the problem, the dramatic one, you don't get to ignore me and then go behind my back and ask my mom how my children are doing, or send my children gifts for holidays and birthdays. You don't get to play the victim. You don't get access to the next generation if you can't even respect the one that you raised. Some toxic relatives want to be around your kids not because they care deeply, but because it gives them status, control, and a way to stay connected to you without having to be held accountable. They want the cute birthday party photos. They want to show off their grandparents' title. They want access to your life without earning your trust. But children are not tools to repair relationships you broke. passes to avoid accountability, emotional trophies for people who still mistreat their loved ones or their family members. If you don't value me, or if someone doesn't value you, they don't deserve a relationship with the most precious part of our worlds. And if you think kids can't sense this, think again. They feel the tension in the room. They hear your tone of voice, even if it's not words. They watch how you're treated, and they absorb that as normal. For example, if I let someone mistreat me and I still allow them around my child, I am teaching my child, this is what love looks like. This is what family does. This is how much of yourself you should tolerate being erased. And that's not a lesson I want my child to carry. That's not a wound I want passed down. Because the truth is, if they talk about me behind my back, they'll talk about my child too. And that's something I've experienced. If they invalidate my boundaries, what boundaries will they teach my kid, or lack thereof? Sometimes the harm isn't obvious. It's not always yelling or hitting or direct cruelty. It's subtle things like passive aggressiveness, comparisons, guilt trips, favoritism, or gaslighting. A toxic relative who doesn't yell but constantly undermines your authority, who treats you like you're a child in front of your children, who gossips about your parenting behind your back. For example, I've experienced this in my own life where apparently my family thinks that my parents are raising my children, and that's simply not true. And I don't know why they think that, because I have a husband who provides for us and takes care of us, but again, they don't choose to know me, so whatever. That person is modeling confusion and instability for your child. If they can't be kind to you, they cannot be trusted to be kind to your children in a way that matters. I made a decision when I became a parent. I will not let my kids grow up in the same emotional chaos that I did. And for me, that means I don't let harmful people linger just because they're family. I don't let my kids be exposed to unhealthy patterns under the mask of tradition. I don't let guilt override my role as their protector. I choose peace, not performance. Safety, not sentiment. Healing, not history. If that makes me the bad guy in the eyes of extended family, so be it, because I know I'm doing what's right for my family now. Real love doesn't hurt you and call it parenting. Real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself to stay in the family. Love respects your voice. Love apologizes and changes. Love shows up without conditions. And if your family members, no matter who they are, aren't doing those things, they don't love you. So if someone says they love your kids, but they don't love or respect or even like you, what they really mean is, I want the benefits of family without the responsibility. And I don't know about you guys, but that is a hard no from me. And going back to that comment of they don't love you, let's go back and analyze that for a minute. If your family constantly disrespects you, violates your boundaries, shuts you out when you speak up, they don't love you in the way that you need or the way that you deserve. They would rather punish you than understand you. They would rather lose connection with you than look at their own behavior and fix the problem. That says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Love should feel safe, regardless of who it comes from. Love doesn't mean that you never disagree. Love doesn't mean people never get it wrong. But love should feel safe. It should feel like there's room for your truth, your needs, and your healing. If you've been trying to earn the bare minimum, basic respect, basic listening, basic humanity, it's okay to stop trying and step back. It's okay to grieve the family that you wanted and accept the reality of the one that you have. And trust me, I'm working on that on my own, and it's a lot harder than what it seems. But one of the things that has really helped me is to realize that it's okay to start creating your own version of family, one where love and respect are a two-way street. Not necessarily with the family members who can't give you that in return, but with the ones that can. The ones that are willing to make the changes, work on themselves, work on the relationships, and give that respect and love back to you that you're asking for. We are all allowed to redefine family and what it means to us. We are allowed to choose peace over proximity. And we are allowed to stop chasing love that doesn't act like love. One thing that I found really neat is the more that I work on myself and my healing journey, the healthier that my children's mental health becomes. The more progress that I've seen in my children's healing, because I'm healing for them. And how do you heal, for example, When your family doesn't like you and someone that you love chooses them over you. When there's no apology, no explanation, or no resolution. Think about this with closure without closure. Grieving a relationship that's still technically alive, but it no longer feels safe, or maybe it doesn't feel safe right now. Because for me, that's kind of how I'm feeling. Right now, in this moment, I'm working on healing myself, healing my trauma, healing my children by being a healthy and present mom. So right now, I'm in a place where I want closure without closure. Because honestly, let's name it for what it is. Some families don't like us no matter what we do. We've talked about that as well. Maybe when you speak up or set the boundaries, maybe when you refuse to perform the version of you that makes them comfortable, they resent you. They twist the truth into that drama. They paint the distance as cruelty. They talk about you like you're difficult when really you just stopped making yourself small and pretending that things were fine. And this is where those boundaries come in. Reverting back to when we talk about don't let your children be around people who don't like you. It's that access point cut off. The truth is, not everyone has the strength to go against the tide. So some people would rather keep the peace than seek truth. Some people confuse loyalty with enabling. And some people just aren't ready to choose the way you've chosen them. And as much as that hurts, it's not your fault. But protecting your peace, protecting those boundaries, having those hard boundaries in place so that your children can see a healthy version of you with healthy boundaries, healing, and being strong, not just for yourself, but for them, by healing what has hurt you in a way that makes you a better person. And truth is, sometimes children need to see us have closure without having closure. Closure is something that we grow up thinking we'll get. That one final conversation, the heartfelt apology, the tearful mutual understanding. Trust me, I've texted my relatives numerous times hoping for that, but it's never something that I've gotten. But the truth is, no one wants to say this out loud. Closure isn't always given. Sometimes it has to be created. Sometimes you'll never get that apology. The door doesn't close with a satisfying click. It just stays ajar, collecting dust and unanswered questions. But guess what? You still heal. It's about your decision to stop needing what they won't give. It's about grieving the fantasy that they'll one day wake up and get it and apologize. Choosing that peace in the presence of unfinished pain. Here's what I want everyone to remember. You are not unlovable because someone chose not to love you well. You are not wrong for protecting your peace even when it made other people feel uncomfortable. You are not too much, too emotional, or too sensitive. You are just asking for respect in a place that couldn't give it. And yes, it's devastating to watch someone you care about align themselves with people who harmed you. But their decision doesn't rewrite your story. You can still be whole. You can still be proud of how you handled yourself. You can still create a life filled with earned love, not just inherited obligation. Closure might not come from a conversation, but it can come from a choice to stop waiting for their apology, to stop chasing them, and to start living on your own terms without their validation. Now, taking this all back full circle, we bring our past into our parenting, into our relationships, always. Sometimes it's the comforting stuff, traditions, laughter, things that make you feel like home. And sometimes it's the hard stuff, the yelling, the emotional distance, neglect, abandonment, the control, the fear of repeating what we swore we'd never become. Parenthood, relationships has a wild way of showing us parts of ourselves that we've buried. You think that you've healed, and then your toddler screams no, your partner walks out, or your teenager slams the door, and suddenly you're 10 years old again, feeling small, unseen, or afraid. Our children, our spouses, our partners, they don't just trigger us, they reveal who we are. They hold up a mirror to our wounds. But I feel like that's also the beauty of it. Parenting gives us a second chance to grow. Same as relationships, the real relationships. When we get into a healthy relationship, but we've been in a toxic environment, it doesn't feel normal. And that's where trauma rears its ugly head. Many of us are trying to do what we've never seen modeled before. We're learning gentle parenting after growing up in homes where love looked like survival. And I'm not talking about the gentle parenting as in soft parenting. I'm talking about taking a moment before we react. So, as we close out this episode, remember that you don't have to earn love from people who withhold it. You don't have to beg people for understanding who are committed to misunderstanding you. And you don't have to share your life, your heart, or your truth, or your family with people who treat it like it's disposable. Closure is painful, but it's also very powerful. When we stop looking for validation in places that broke us, we begin finding it in ourselves. Remember that your peace is not up for negotiation. Remember that your boundaries, your feelings, your experiences are valid. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be healing. And it's going to be far from easy, but again, I promise you it will be worth it. As we end this episode, please remember that this content shared in this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing discussed should be taken as professional advice, a professional diagnosis, or a substitute for licensed mental health services. While I am a social worker, I adhere to the code of ethics. This platform does not establish professional client relationships. I speak from lived experience and professional perspective, but each situation is unique, and listeners are encouraged to seek individualized support from a professional or qualified provider. All stories, either personal reflections or generalized experiences, no names or identifying details are shared to protect privacy and uphold confidentiality. By listening, you agree that this podcast and its host are not liable for any decisions made outside of listening to this podcast or as a result of this podcast. For legal purposes, the privacy of this podcast protects names, individuals, identities. The content discussed in these episodes is not meant to defame or slander anyone. As always, thank you for listening, and I will see you later.